So Clint Chambliss of Locked On Bulldogs compared Trinidad Chambliss to Jackson Arnold. Nope, I'm not going to overreact to that.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I am your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we will talk about the Ole Miss versus Georgia game with Daniel Monroe, going over the path to victory of each team and the score predictions while looking at the players that you should watch out for. But first, we have to start with Daniel's compatriot at Locked On Bulldogs, comparing Trinidad Chambliss to Jackson Arnold. And here's the thing. I think he really believed it too. All of that and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. So we do this thing with college football kickoff on Amazon, and we recorded it like 5 o'clock yesterday. And it was me and Clint Chambliss of Locked On Bulldogs talking about it. And we're talking about our keys to the game and what we need to pay attention to and why Ole Miss is going to win and why Georgia is going to win and all of that. And everything was fine. I was absolutely okay with everything. Then they're like, hey, Clint, give your prediction of what was going on. And Clint just dropped a bomb just on me. He like scrambled my brain where he said, hey, Georgia just faced a quarterback just like Trinidad Chambliss and Jackson Arnold. And at that point, my ears just started humming. I couldn't hear anything after that because it was just so nonsensical. It didn't make any sense. And I like Clint. Clint's one of my dudes, okay? But that take was insanely bad. All I could say is like, well, that was mean. But that is what went on. So that explains the question I'm about to ask Daniel Monroe, his compatriot of Locked On Bulldogs, once we get into Thunderdome about the Trinidad Chambliss Jackson Arnold comparison. That is where it's coming from. So without further ado, let's go. Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss. Daniel Monroe, Locked On Bulldogs. They're in the house. Listen, okay, we have to talk about this real quick before we get started. I just did the Amazon thing with your compatriot from Locked On Bulldogs, Clint Chambliss. Yeah. And he, with a straight face, literally in front of millions upon millions of people.
Right. I don't know if it's that many people, Stephen, but go on.
But he actually, with a straight face, compared Trinidad Chambliss to Jackson Arnold. And I'm still like flabbergasted by that comment.
That's not how you see it. Is that not how the Ole Miss fan base is doing this? I mean, I don't know. To be fair, Trinidad Chambliss, unbelievable. Also, to be fair, I was told that the guy that got benched in favor of Trinidad Chambliss was going to be like the best quarterback in the SEC by Ole Miss fans all offseason. And so, like, you got a good quarterback. Like, that's definitely for sure. But it just is not the quarterback that all the Ole Miss fans thought going into the season, right? Was going to be the guy.
Yeah, and to be fair, and I will say this, Austin Simmons got benched for nothing that he did. He completely got Wally pipped, and when Trinidad Chambliss came in, he took it over and made the plays and all that to where he couldn't be sat down. Austin Simmons is still a very good quarterback, and you hear all of them talking about they have two really good quarterbacks, which there's some places that would kill for just one at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, several SEC schools would be happy to have.
Speaking of Jackson Arnold,
some of the quarterbacks that'll be playing in this game. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about storylines in this game, because I think this is for Ole Miss, a win-win situation, literally. If Ole Miss wins, it is the last corner turned for a program. They're going to be a favorite for Atlanta, the whole 9 yards. If Ole Miss loses, it does nothing. There is no consequences for Ole Miss losing a road game in Athens, Georgia. The important thing that they have to be careful about is if they do lose this game in Athens, Georgia, don't lose the game in Norman, Oklahoma because of it.
Yeah. I do think that's and that in years past that would be a factor. You know, you play these old Nick Saban Alabama teams, you play a Kirby Smart team, they could beat you twice. You hear that expression used a lot. I wouldn't be so worried about that if I was an Ole Miss fan. We do live in a different era, Steve. And so like the college football playoff with it being 12 teams, you're absolutely right. This game's not going to break Ole Miss's season. They're obviously set up in a premium position. The schedule, I think, plays out pretty well, all things considered, given the fact that you're in the SEC for Ole Miss moving forward. But a loss is still a loss. And you start opening that door to, well, you got 5 more games after this. And so are you really going to go undefeated? Are you going to go 4-1 in those 5 games, which you would have to do to make the playoff, you would assume. And so I do think both teams have a lot to play for in this game, but Georgia probably more than Ole Miss, given the fact that they already have a loss and this game is at home. You don't want to be in a position where you've already lost 2 home games if you're Georgia and having to go perfect for the rest of the season just to have a shot at the playoff. And so, yeah.
And that game at Bobby Dodd Stadium with 2 losses would be terrifying for Georgia.
Yeah, it's at the Mercedes-Benz this year, which is actually helpful for Georgia because for some reason nobody wants to play college games on college campuses, which I'm not sure how you feel about, but I think it's the dumbest thing that's ever happened to college football. Play college football games on college football campuses. It's not hard.
Yeah, Ole Miss and Mississippi State used to play in Jackson every single year. That was the thing. And in the 90s, they moved it back to campus, and it's just been it hasn't been a thought of playing a game outside of a college campus. Now,
and I'm a fan of a team that plays in Jacksonville every year against Florida in a great environment, but play college games on college campuses. Anyway, we digress. That's not the storyline in this game. Yeah, I do think Georgia probably has more to play for here. I don't know that there's more pressure on Georgia. I mean, I think when I look at this game, the storylines that I'm going to look at are how real is the Lane Kiffin rhetoric from the post-game press conference last week. Like, we were just looking ahead. We're putting all our eggs in this Georgia basket. Kind of admitted that he's committing the cardinal sin as a coach, that they weren't really taking Washington State very seriously. How good is Ole Miss coming into this game? I think it's still a question. And I think we know Georgia's a fine team. They are not 2022 Georgia. They are not 2021 Georgia. They are not 2020 Alabama. Like, they're not one of those teams. I don't know that those teams
I don't
exist.
think they're 2023 Georgia, to be honest.
Yeah,
With
2023 Georgia.
2023
Georgia was one of our best teams. We got hosed, left out of the playoff. You know, the last 14 playoff, like, should have been in, but didn't get in. But that was a championship level team. Those teams don't exist in college football anymore. There's none of those teams. And so Georgia's not that team. It's not like this juggernaut of Georgia. But I do think, based on going to Tennessee, based on playing Alabama, both 2 teams that I think we would agree are good football teams.
Yes.
So I think that we know a little bit about who Georgia is. They're not elite, but they are very good, and they'll grind out a win, and they can do it a lot of different ways. I think there's more questions maybe in my mind about who this Ole Miss football team is, just because we've seen them play really well, and we've seen them struggle, particularly last week against a really bad Washington State team at home in a kind of a look-ahead spot.
All right, when we come back, we will get into players to watch, and I will tell Daniel what I think about how good Ole Miss football is right after this on Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Bulldogs. So stick around. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorsteps tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. You can talk about a game changer there. The Part Finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on the job where every detail matters. And their Trademaster perks, well, it's kind of like having priority shipping and dedicated support. It makes the whole process smoother. So join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated phone support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHCollege5. That's all one word, SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if that bet wins. That's right. Pick a bet. Put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many different ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, even followed the live lines during the game. It makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keep all of this free. Locked On is getting ready to change the game again, all in the name of having fun following your team. We're the most fun way to follow Ole Miss sports. Well, Locked On's about to take it to the next level. It's coming in December. Stay tuned to that. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is ready for you. All right, Daniel, we're back. Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss. Daniel Monroe, Locked On Bulldogs. Listen, yes, I've said this multiple times this week, as you can imagine, but Lane Kiffin admitted that they practice on the Georgia Bulldogs during the bye week 2 days. Just straight up. Yeah, before they practiced for Georgia on the bye week. Mm-hmm. So I view that coach speak like U.S. military technology. You only know about 20% of what's actually out there.
Sure.
So if he's talking about 2 days, they probably did it 5. And that explains a lot of what they put in. If you looked at the offense, we had Jake Crane from Crane & Company on my podcast early in the week, and he's like, this is the most vanilla offense that Lane Kiffin has ever put out there. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to flush it, move on. They're obviously looking for the Georgia Bulldogs because I think Lane knows that after what happened in Oxford a year ago, he is going to get Georgia's best. And I am thankful as an Ole Miss fan that this game is not at night. If this game was at night, that's probably worth 14 points in this ball game because of Kirby being really jacked up and all of that. I think in the daytime, better shot. Georgia is going to be good because they are still one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the Southeastern Conference and one of the best teams in America. So I am under no illusion that Ole Miss is just going to walk in and win that game at all. But Ole Miss is talented enough to where if they get just a couple of breaks, they don't have to play well, but they do need some help, a little bit of help. And if they get that help, which Georgia has been giving to teams in the first half of games, they've
tried.
Yeah. If Ole Miss gets that help, instead of a 10-0 game like you saw at Auburn, it could be 21-0 because the Ole Miss offense can do some of the stuff that Tennessee did with the deep passes, but they can also run the ball and do some of the stuff that Auburn was effective with in that game in the first half. Now, I am under no illusions. Again, this is Kirby Smart we're dealing with. It's going to get taken care of, and he's amped up for this game. But I think Dae'quan Wright and Cayden in the middle of the field are going to be important in this game. In pass coverage, Georgia's linebackers, when they're coming up and playing the run, they're the best in college football, but they can be taken advantage of whenever they're matched up one-on-one with a slot receiver like Cayden Lee, just like Ole Miss did a year ago.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to try to do that, but with Trinidad Chambliss being 5'10", 5'11", you're going to see those tall trees raise their hands up to where the middle of the field might get taken away. But I think Dae'quan Wright and Cayden Lee are the 2 players to watch in this football game.
Yeah, what you saw in the second half against Jackson Arnold, who we know is a carbon copy of Trinidad Chambliss, Stephen.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same.
What you saw in the second half was a lot of spy, sometimes even double spy, where you had multiple linebackers watching. We know Auburn had 15 total yards of offense in the second half. Late in the fourth quarter, they had negative 5 yards rushing in the second half. It worked really well. Obviously, 130 yards rushing in the first half for Auburn. They got those mistakes cleaned up. I do think you're going to see some spy from guys like CJ Allen, because obviously you gotta be wary. You can't just be wary of the underneath passing game. You get your eyes moving side to side in some of these formations and route combinations that Lane likes to run, and all of a sudden that's where the quarterback's going to hit you. Guys are going to have to stay in their rush lanes. Linebackers are going to have to be home. The safeties are probably going to have to come down and help with some of that underneath stuff so that the linebackers can be freed up to keep their eye on the quarterback. I'm curious on your end. And so I do agree. I think CJ Allen, Raylan Wilson, Justin Williams, the true sophomore, Chris Cole, those guys are going to have a big role in the outcome of this game defensively. People look at the secondary and say the secondary's had issues this year. It's really the pass rush that's had issues this year. And it's hard to rush a guy like Chambliss anyway, because he's so elusive and he's so quick and they do so many designed runs. And so you can't just pin your ears back and come after him. And so it's tough to get a pass rush anyway. The secondary has been okay. I think the linebackers are going to be really important in this game. I'm curious from your perspective, from an Ole Miss side, about that Ole Miss defensive front. Georgia's shown as a huge upgrade from last year's team, where Georgia finished 14th in the SEC in rushing, outside the top 100 nationally in rushing. I'm talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, finished outside the top 100 nationally in rushing last year. They've increased their rushing yards per game output by over 90 yards, Stephen, per game this year. The really emphasis on running football. Chauncey Bowens, Nate Frazier have been really good out of the backfield. We know Ole Miss lost a ton on that defensive front from last year.
All of them.
All of it. And so, but now it's not last year anymore. We're 6 games in. And so from your perspective, how's that group going to stack up against a banged up offensive line, but an offensive line that's been creating a lot of holes in the run game? 275 on the ground against Alabama in the last, in the last marquee home game that Georgia had. How's that Ole Miss defensive front going to hold up?
Well, the good news for Ole Miss fans is their 2 pups, no pun intended, are starting to grow up. With Kamarion Franklin and William Eccles, 2 5-star players that are true sophomores that are starting this year. Cam Franklin had a sack and a half against Washington State. He was one of the few players that actually played pretty well. William Eccles is back-to-back dominant sacks of getting pass rush and as well. And then Xavier Harris, he's 350 pounds. You know about Xavier Harris. He's been at Ole Miss, it feels like 10 years. So it depends on if Pete Golding, and I genuinely believe he's been playing odd fronts this year because he didn't have to worry about the running game, the physicality of it. LSU, they didn't stick with it. Tulane, even Washington State, you didn't have to worry about that. You could rush 3 and drop 8 and be very vanilla on the back end. You're not going to be able to do that against Georgia, because Georgia and Mike Bola will absolutely run you out of an 8-man coverage. So I'm expecting some even fronts, maybe even some odd 5-man fronts for the Ole Miss Rebels, where they're going with 2 linemen, Princely Amonmi, or Prince Will Amonmi Ellen, I should say.
There it is. Yeah,
there
easy for you to say.
Yes. Lining up, playing a little bit of linebacker, stand-up defensive end, but they're trying to get Gunner Stockton into 2nd and 8. They're trying to avoid the 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, first down, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, first down. Because if that happens, you're cooked. Yeah. So they need to figure out a way to stop the running game and force 2nd and 3rd down and long yardage. And if they can do that, then they can NASCAR package it a little bit, and they can get after Gunner Stockton, because they have played the cream of the cream of rushing quarterbacks in the SEC. That is something that they have seen this year. So I think they'll be able to handle Gunner Stockton. He's a little bit different, but he's not Taylor Green as far as somebody that can just outrun you. I'm curious to see what it looks like. I'm more concerned, honestly, about the running backs. I'm not the linebackers and against the Georgia running backs. I think you're going to see some screens in this game. I think Bobo's going to get into his bag a little bit. I think Bell's going to be running some end arounds. They're going to mess with the eyes of the linebackers in order to get those short yardage games. And the linebackers that Ole Miss has, TJ Daugherty, Jaden Yates, Taj Chambers, those guys, this is going to be two of the three's biggest game that they've ever played in front of. And Jaden, well, I guess Jaden Yates played at Ohio Stadium, so that probably counts a little bit towards that. But in this game, this is going to be huge. College game day, the whole 9 yards. There's a freak out factor with this defense. And if they can avoid the bust, because Ole Miss's problem in run defense, when you look at the stats, it's like, man, they're giving up 150 yards a game. That doesn't tell the whole story. For 95% of the game, they're giving up 2 and 3 yards per carry, but they give up 2 or 3 explosive plays a game that is skewing that. If they cannot give up explosives against the Georgia Bulldogs, they're going to be fine. And if you stop Georgia's running game, Ole Miss is going to win this game. But the problem is stopping Georgia's running game.
Yeah. If you score more points than the other team, you're going to win almost every time. Yeah.
You just
got to score more points than the other team.
You just got to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the last time Ole Miss won it in Athens was, 1996? Now, they don't play every year, but it's been a minute.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. And that game, by the way, the Ole Miss collective, Walker Jones, ran down Hines Ward in that game on a long pass. Yes, that game happened.
Some legends. Yeah, I mean, you're really coming off of, the more recent history, more interesting to me. You're coming off of a really big win for Lane and the program last year, in Oxford, to get that win against Kirby, to kind of validate proof of concept. Now, of course, they faltered down the stretch and, didn't end the season the way that they wanted to, but that it was a big win for Lane and company last year. And then you look back 2 years ago, the last time Lane Kiffin was in Athens, and, it was a bloodbath.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was an absolute show. And so I'm not expecting really either type of performance. I mean, Ole Miss kind of dominated the game last year, and Georgia obviously dominated the game 2 years ago. I don't think this Georgia team, the next time they dominate somebody will be the first time they dominated somebody. So I'm not looking for it. At this point, you couldn't look for it. At this point, if you don't bet the Ole Miss first quarter line on FanDuel, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you haven't been watching a Georgia football game all year. Like, if you're not going to bet that line, I don't know what to. But then Georgia in the second half, 0 points to Alabama, 17 fewer points to Tennessee in the second half and overtime than they allowed in the first half. 0 points to Auburn in the second half, and 0 points other than a garbage time touchdown against the fourth stringers against Kentucky in the second half. The Georgia defense in the second half just figures it out. We know Kirby's the best in the game, but Lane's right there with him on the offensive side of the ball. One of the best in the game in terms of calling a game. It's what makes a matchup like this so fun, because it's not only the players going against each other, it's the offensive and defensive minds. So it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it should be a whole lot of fun. I've joked on my show this week that you almost need 2 game plans for this game. You need a first half game plan, and then when they adjust to that, you break out the second game plan.
Yeah.
That's probably the way that you attack this Georgia team, because they are so good at adjusting at halftime. They are really good. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk paths to victory and give our score predictions as well. Daniel Monroe of Locked On Bulldogs. I'm Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss. Stick around. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every single model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence throughout almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, so it's time for paths to victory. And one thing that I'm interested about in this one is I think this game is going to be insanely tight. I do not think it's going to get to the point where Georgia is a 7.5 point favorite like they are. I think it's going to swing back and forth right on that line, and it's going to consistently be a one-score game throughout the game. That's just what I think is going to happen. Now, the question that I have is whether Lane can keep his composure in an environment like that to where the biggest win potentially setting up everything is on the table. Can you not go for it in ill-conceived spots? Can you take field goals when they're available? If you can do that, they're going to be all right and in it at the end. But there's two factors. There's that, and there's Trinidad Chambliss just kind of freaking out in front of 90,000 at Sanford Stadium, which I don't think that that's going to happen. But until you see it, you have to consider it as a possibility. But I think the path to victory for Ole Miss is a quick start. And instead of 10-0, like Auburn got 2 scores against Auburn and Tennessee, Georgia's come back like it's basically nothing. You have to keep your foot on the gas against the Georgia Bulldogs. And once you get the lead, you have to make it all about stopping the offense. Don't worry necessarily. Do whatever you can to keep the defense as fresh as you can. But at that point, you want death marches to be 10 and 11 minutes long for them to score. You want it to be as difficult as possible. And if that happens, Ole Miss can escape with the win. I'm going to call because I'm an ultra homer. This is as Locked On Ole Miss for a reason.
As you should be. You should be, Stephen.
I'm calling 21-20. Ole Miss is going to win in Athens.
Yeah, I don't disagree that I don't think the game's going to get out of hand. I think if anything, Georgia games have only been out of hand early, and they've been out of hand in the other direction. And then Georgia's come back, even in the Alabama game. Really kind of should have won. Guy drops a wide open deep ball touchdown pass that would have been the difference in the game. So they didn't make it all the way back against Alabama, but they still rallied back, like you said, from multiple scores down. This Georgia defense has proven that they can do it, that they can figure it out all year. I think the one thing I'm confident about going into this game is at home, Mike Bobo and the Georgia offensive game plan being able to have success against this Ole Miss defense. I am not confident in the Georgia defense's ability to stop Ole Miss, but I am pretty confident in Georgia's ability to, like you said, maybe get these linebackers' eyes in the wrong spots, use Zachariah Branch in the screen game the way that they have, use guys like Oscar Delp out on the perimeter, to block for, electric, fast wide receivers on some of this quick game stuff that we've seen Georgia get 10, 12, 14, 20, even earlier in the season, 50 yards, gains on just this little quick stuff, and then physical perimeter blocking. That's kind of the identity of this Georgia team. I think Chauncey Bowens is going to be a little bit healthier than he was against Auburn. I think the offensive line continues to get a little healthier. And very quietly, Gunner Stockton statistically is the best quarterback in the SEC. And nobody thinks Gunner Stockton's the best quarterback in the SEC. Certainly not outside of Athens, they don't. But you just look at the numbers and you look at what he's done from an efficiency standpoint, and you look at what he does week in and week out. And Gunner Stockton's proving himself to be among the, if not the most effective quarterback in the SEC. So I trust this Georgia offense. I do think Lane is going to get his. I don't necessarily, it just feels too on the nose to say if this game's going to play out the way that all the rest of them have for Georgia, where Ole Miss jumps out to a 10-point first quarter lead and then Georgia battles back and whatever. I think it'll be a bit more back and forth throughout. I got something like 20-27 in this game, like 20-28. I do think Georgia's going to win at home, but I got Ole Miss playing similarly, it sounds like, offensively to how you have them. But I do have this Georgia offense scoring a little bit more probably than an Ole Miss fan might hope for or think. I just really do trust this Georgia offensive unit. They are not explosive, but they are incredibly efficient, and they get the job done, staying ahead of the chains, staying on schedule, and then kind of wearing you down. I mean, against Auburn, to put that game away, 16 plays, 78 yards, 8 minutes and 45 seconds, and an absolute gut punch. That is a Kirby Death March trademark drive. And that's kind of who this Georgia offense is. So I do think they're going to get theirs. I got about 4 touchdowns for Georgia. And yeah, I'll go 27, 28 to 20 or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like, for the Ole Miss fans that are watching this, Ole Miss stopping the run and getting beat by Gunner Stockton. Okay, that's what you want. If you get beat by Gunner Stockton throwing the football, that's exactly the way that you would do it. You just don't want to get beat by handing the ball off to the tailback and it just turns into an over and over type thing, much like the 2023 game. That's what you're trying to avoid, because that can derail a whole season. If this is a close game, you lose 28-20, like Daniel suggested, you're going to be all right going to Oklahoma, because if you win that Oklahoma game, you're 7th in the country, and you have South Carolina, Florida, the Citadel, and Mississippi State left.
Well, I said this schedule, man. Like, and don't look now, Stephen, but I don't think Oklahoma is very good. So I don't know if your fan base is ready to hear that, but I'm just not sure. I mean, how many hands does John Mateer have by that point? And even, like, this Oklahoma offense is, to say it's one-dimensional. I think Ole Miss is almost certainly in the college football playoff unless the wheels fall off at this point. But I'm sure Ole Miss fans are not ready to go there at this point.
And before we get out of here, what is the status of the 2 offensive tackles?
Monroe Freeling's going to play. I mean, he gutted it out. He was in and out. Kirby said in the post game he didn't even think he was going to make the trip, and Monroe Freeling basically forced his way onto the bus to get on the travel roster, and then was able to go for a good portion of the game. Ernest Green, I think he's still a little farther away. To me, more important than that is what's the health of Juan Gaston. He had to come out of the game because of an ankle thing that he's been dealing with, a 5-star true freshman that has been filling in at right tackle for Ernest Green. And to be honest, I think he's a better player than Ernest Green. And so I think he's healthy. I think he's going to go. Ernest Green might be available in a limited capacity. I think Monroe Freeling's going to go. But, man, that thing is a mash unit, Stephen. Like, they're all over the place. But, man, some of these backups have come in and played really admirably. Georgia's starting 2 true freshmen on the offensive line almost every week of the season so far in the SEC. That's wild. I mean, it's not a recipe for success. That is not how you want to do it.
And they're running the ball down people's throats. So,
they're rushing for 200-plus yards a game. So
that's impressive.
Credit to those guys.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for doing this. Locked on Ole Miss, Stephen Willis. Locked on Bulldogs, Daniel Monroe. Tell everybody how to watch your stuff after the game.
Oh, yeah. We're just at Dogs Podcast on X if you want to follow along and argue with Clint about Trinidad Chambliss. That's where you can find him. He would love to interact with you. He probably will be interacting with you as the game progresses. And then, just Locked on Bulldogs wherever you get your stuff. If you listen to Steven, then you know how good of a job he does. Just expect that product with an extra guy minus about 75% of the quality, and that's exactly what you're going to get from Locked on Bulldogs.
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, it's a very good show. They do an excellent job of Locked on Bulldogs. You can catch me like 30 minutes after the final whistle. We will do a reaction show on the game. We'll either be unbelievable elated or we'll be unbelievably deflated, one way or another. So tune in for that. Anyway, Daniel, thank you very much, and good luck if you heading to Athens if you're not already there.
Yeah, I'll be headed down there tomorrow, so we'll see.
All right, appreciate it, bud. Take care.
Hey, buddy.
All right. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. If you don't believe me, Google Ole Miss podcast and see how much we come up. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it's absolutely free. Your support means the world to us. In another big moment on Locked On, college football fans, Locked On and Fire TV are presenting College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation a long time. Two-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. It's a college football preview show that only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Hotty toddy, everybody. Remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.